order the December 11th meeting of the Issaquah City Council Services and Safety Committee. I am Chris Ray. I am the chair. With me this evening are Deputy Council President Mariah Batiste and Council Member Victoria Hunt. We have two items on our agenda today. We have Agenda Bill 7693, amending IMC Title III, Revenue and Finance, to streamline the accounts payable process, and Agenda Bill 7696, termination of the interlocal agreement for public defense monitoring services. So we'll get started, and first up is Agenda Bill 7693, and presenting is Renee Wasisco. Renee, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'll try to be concise and answer any questions, hopefully at the end of the presentation. I'm here to present Agenda Bill 7693, which amends the municipal code language. The goal is to streamline the accounts payable process and shorten the time for invoice processing. This agenda bill adopts changes to the Municipal Code Chapter 3 to allow the Finance Department to remit accounts payable payments to vendors prior to council approval. This has been allowed under RCW 42.24.180 since the mid-90s. We do meet the minimum requirements of the RCW to implement this practice. For example, we have adequate insurance coverage for all of our employees for faithful performance of duties as required, and we have effective internal controls over purchasing and payment of invoices. As noted in the slides, based on our research and past work experience, many cities of similar size have adopted this practice, including Mercer Island, Kent, Linwood, Woodinville, Redmond, and Bellevue. King County Library District also has adopted this practice as well many years ago. Continuous accounts payable processing is a best practice and applies lien management principles. I've been with the city for a few months now, and I oversee the accounts payable process and internal controls. I've noticed a sharp increase in invoices the week before the council meeting. As you can imagine, this causes a significant increase in workflow and forces processing of invoices in a shorter window than if we processed in a continuous method. So why make this change? In our current system, checks are not mailed until the Tuesday after the council meeting. We're looking at a minimum of 21 days from the receipt of the invoice, often longer from when an invoice is received until payment goes out. This at times can subject the city to late penalties, for example, utility bills, and take staff time to call and try to get late fees removed, which isn't always successful. It also doesn't allow the city to take advantage of any early payment discounts and rebates, which could be a real savings. In addition, allowing payment prior to council approval will improve customer service satisfaction for vendors, residents, and employees. So how would this affect the accounts payable process? After implementation, council will still continue to review the report of payments at regular meetings, and if needed, they can send an email request to the finance director to ask follow-up questions. And if it's determined that a repayment did need to happen, city staff would pursue collection of funds. So far, there have been no instances in the last several years where the council has rejected a payment. Any questions?
Councilmember Hunt.
On the timing, we as council typically meet every 2 weeks, and so I'm wondering how the 21 days comes about and why it would take 21 days on average instead of every 2 weeks. And then I didn't understand also on the timing about when you were saying that there seems to be an increase right before council meetings. I guess I didn't understand why why this change would help with that timing issue.
Sure. So we're decentralized at the city. Actually, not all of the invoices are entered by the finance department. They're entered by the other departments because they do receive the invoices and they enter them into Munis. And so they have deadlines, which is the Monday prior to the council meeting, or actually the Friday prior to the council meetings, where they need to send up their batches of invoices for payment so that we can do an additional review and submit everything for final processing and issuing the checks. So if they receive it after the deadline to the finance department, they've already missed the next approval cycle. So they'll, take an extra 2 weeks at that point. And there's also, with the Munis software, there's an electronic approval that needs to happen. And so when people are out on vacation, sometimes they don't approve the invoices before they leave, so they won't be printed because they have to wait for that actual manager to come back in and approve them.
Okay,
in
so
the
it would just give you basically more options of when to process the
It would
invoice.
smooth out the workflow greatly, and I think it would really help the departments as well, because a lot of times they want to add additional, but it's too late for them. And then sometimes we end up dealing with vendor calls, when am I going to get my payment? So we're just trying to cut out a lot of the extra work involved.
Okay. And then I have two more. So one is that you mentioned that it is allowed already by, was that to say that it would be allowed in the state code,
Yeah, that's.
but not in our municipal code? And so,
Yeah, we would need to update our municipal code to allow us to process according to the RCW.
okay.
That's been
And then
passed.
other cities have also done that.
Yes.
And then my last question is, as you know, I have in the past sometimes had questions about items in terms of what different items in the accounts payable actually refer to, because the description is not always very clear to me. And so I wondered, in terms of council's role in approving, one thing I think I understood from this is that council can still review, and there could be, if there was an issue, that could be addressed retroactively.
Yes.
And then also, would it be possible to help with the council review to get different descriptors, or maybe more descriptors? Or do you think that the process of having council just email questions if something is unclear is working, or do you see options for how we might improve that?
I feel that we can respond to your questions pretty quickly, and I don't see, I did look at the reports, and I agree that they're straight from the accounting system, because that's the best report that we have that has the most information on it, so that's why we're providing it that way. But I do think that it's important that if you have questions about vendors or what we're paying for, that you're able to ask those questions. So I'm available as well.
Okay, so the system of council, if we do have questions, asking questions wouldn't change, but it would, I guess, give you more flexibility in terms of addressing those invoice questions without waiting for the approval at a given time.
Right, and we have our new purchasing card program where we can get significant rebates based upon the timing of the payment. So, as that becomes implemented further, we should see some significant rebates that we didn't see previously. So.
Deputy President Batiste?
Thank you for your presentation. Councilmember Hunt covered a few of the questions that I had. I just had one question about, is it typical for cities, is that standard where each department is entering their own AP, their own invoices, and it's not consolidated under accounts payable? Is that a typical practice, or is that?
I don't know if that's typical, but based on the size of the accounts payable staff in this city, that's because of the way that Munis works, that's the only way to really process effectively.
So they're entering all the invoice information, and then accounts payable also has the information and is checking that as it comes through before payment?
Correct. They send up the batches with all the hard copies behind it, and they're also scanned into the accounting software. And those are reviewed prior to posting and issuing any checks.
Okay, thank you.
Can you spend just a minute and talk about the current review and audit process that the accounts payable goes through today, from when a department enters a voucher until it goes to council today for final approval?
Sure. So generally for most departments, the department manager, director will receive the invoice from within their department, from their support services staff, and sign off on the invoice. And then it gets entered into Munis, the software with a barcode. From there, it is also sent out electronically. It's routed through the software, and the manager has to approve it a second time. And since it's scanned in, they can pull it right up on their desktop.
That's the same manager approving it again?
In some cases. In other departments, the support services staff just receives the invoices and scans them all in, and then they'll get routed for approval. After that process takes place, they're batched and sent up to the finance department, hard copies, and it's also reviewed for accuracy at that point. Dollar amount, vendor, approval. And then after the batches are entered and approved and ready, then they come to my desk, and I review them as well and sign off,
Was that 3 reviews?
at least, at a minimum.
What are the requirements of the RCW? Because you mentioned that we meet the requirements of the RCW that would permit us to go ahead and do this?
The insurance for all employees, basically covering fraud and abuse. It's pretty typical. And then the hiring, the purchasing and dispersing policies that we have, like all the internal controls over approvals. Like requiring original receipts, having everything scanned in and signed off. More than one person reviewing it. And then the rest of the RCW just deals with the legislative body must, review the list and sign off on the list at their meeting, at their next council meeting, subsequent to the disbursement. So that list is already provided under the current system. This just really allows us to send the checks out as we process.
I was just looking at IMC 3.16, which is the claims fund, and then I was looking at the ordinance that is being proposed, and it's significantly longer.
Yes, from looking at the old one, it seems fairly outdated, so I'm not sure how long it's been.
So there's some, in addition to changing the process of when we cut checks, there looks like there's some other kind of cleanup that's going on too.
Yeah, just laying out the RCW and what it states.
Any other questions for Renee? Councilmember Hunt?
I can't find it right now, but I think that this had legal review in terms of the way that the replacement code was written.
Yes, the city attorney reviewed it and gave the okay. It's similar language to a lot of other cities when I researched their municipal code.
Okay. Anything else? Thanks, Renee. Any thoughts or comments? Councilmember Hunt.
I appreciated the extra explanation about why this would expedite the process that's used for processing these payments, and I think it makes sense.
Anything else? Councilmember Deputy President Batiste.
I too, I think this makes sense, and just, again, appreciated the information about the changes that need to be made, and it sounds like it's gone through legal review, so I would be okay with this.
Great, and I think it's outstanding that we're looking for ways to make the city operate more effectively also, so thank you for doing that, Renee. Okay, all of those who would like to send this back to full council for action, say aye.
Aye.
Any objection to putting this on consent?
No objection.
How about consent?
January 7th.
January 7. Okay, thanks, Renee,
Thank you.
and welcome. Glad to have you.
Nice meeting you.
All right. And next, we have Agenda Bill 7696, termination of the interlocal agreement for public defense monitoring services, and Autumn Monahan is going to be presenting this evening. Hello, Autumn.
Hi. So my name's Autumn Monahan. I'm the assistant to the city administrator, and I manage all of our court contracts for our municipal courts. That includes our public defender, our prosecutor, and a few other contracts. So I'm here tonight to talk about terminating our interlocal agreement for our public defense monitoring services with the city of Snoqualmie. And to provide you some history, back in 2013, there was a federal case called Wilbur versus Mount Vernon, which found that that city wasn't providing adequate public defense services. The defenders had really high caseloads, and overall were not representing their clients in a very meaningful way. So after that ruling, a lot of cities did some self-reflection and reevaluated their public defense systems. Here in Issaquah, like I said, our mayor's office manages all of our court contracts, and we really wanted a third party to review our public defender services and be a resource in case we ever received complaints. We're not experts in public defense services, and we're looking for some expertise in that area. But as we, looked around, there wasn't much of a profession for people who would monitor public defenders. And this also was a new expense for the city back then. So we started a very innovative partnership with 3 other cities and applied for a grant with the State Office of Public Defense. And so in early 2015, we started an interlocal agreement with Sammamish, North Bend, and Snoqualmie for all of us to hire 1 public defense monitor. And we were very successful in receiving a grant from OPD for that program. And we hired a monitor who was a pro tem judge and started with us back in 2015. We then applied for subsequent OPD grants and received feedback that they were more interested in funding new initiatives instead of ongoing ones. And so we started, all 4 cities started to pay for this service, but soon after, several of the cities started to drop out of the ILA agreement. Snoqualmie continued on with us until this current time, but we received word that our monitor is going to be retiring this year. And so it was a good time to look at this ILA agreement with Snoqualmie, and there's not much benefit for the city in continuing this partnership with Snoqualmie. We do not share the same public defense firm, so we don't share the same monitor or defenders very often. Like I said, our monitor is retiring, so this is a good time for us to look for someone just for the city of Issaquah. And I'm doing all the administrative work for both cities, and there's not much benefit for us doing that for Snoqualmie as far as doing all the pass-through fees and invoicing and management of the contract. So we just thought this was a good time for us to move on. We have started looking for a new monitor, and there is now a growing space of people who are interested, especially pro tem judges, in doing this type of work for cities. So we have found some interested folks who are excited and willing to be our monitor. So we're in that process right now. And I've spoken with Snoqualmie, and they understand that it's time for us to end this ILA. And while the program was successful, mostly it was involving grant funding. So I think this is just a housekeeping item, really in nature. I checked with our city attorney, and he said that we should get council approval for this because this ILA is ongoing until we say otherwise. So that's why I'm here tonight. So I'm here to answer any questions.
Great, thanks. Deputy President Batiste.
Thanks for the presentation. It sounds like this makes sense. It started with the grant and bringing all the cities together, and now everyone has started to split apart. With the partnership that we currently have, is that a big cost savings, or when you take into account the work that you're doing and the city is doing. So can you just speak to that?
Yes, so we're not profiting off of the interlocal agreement with Snoqualmie. It's just a pass-through fee. So it's based on caseload, and we charge them just based on caseload, how many defense cases they've had versus Issaquah. So we're not,
So it's more just that the city is processing all of that and not really, okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Hunt?
I wondered about Snoqualmie, just because it is an interlocal agreement and there are multiple parties in it because it's interlocal. What if we had feedback from them about their thoughts on the severance and if there was any issues or if they were in agreement that the time had sort of expired on this?
they were open to continuing the interlocal agreement, but I was the one managing the contract, so they understood that it was time for us to move on, yes. They did, and I also mentioned to Snoqualmie that once we find a monitor, we'll share that person's contact information if they're interested in continuing, so.
And then also, I imagine that this is, as it was before, this is a person, this isn't like a full-time
No.
position, but you said that it is something that now you're confident that the city will be able to find a person. So I guess I just wondered about the continuity of the service being provided for the monitoring.
Sure, yes. So yes, there has been some interest from others, and it's definitely a growing field. When we first started this program, I had a whole lot of cities calling me and saying, this is really interesting, and this could be a really good solution for our cities as well. So it's definitely a growing space, and there are a lot of, especially, like I said, pro tem judges who are interested in this type of work, that understand how a courtroom works. And it's a small contract for our monitor. It's about $10,000 a year.
Deputy President Batiste?
So I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So with Snoqualmie, because the monitor was retiring, there would be a new monitor that would come on, and because they're two different public defender groups, they would need to monitor this and then also monitor that. Okay, all right. I'm just making sure I understand. Thanks.
So this would be a whole lot simpler for Issaquah if we were to hire our own and they would only focus on our public defender.
Only on our, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if I look at Section 19 of the ILA, which you probably don't have in front of you, but it's the one on termination. It talks about 120 days of notice. Did we give 120 days of notice?
I did.
Oh, you're so good. All right, so effective, it'll be then effective the end of this year?
It'd be effective per council action.
Okay, so
Yes.
sometime early next year?
Yep.
Okay.
What section?
19? Page 5 of the ILA, page before the signatures. I don't have any other questions. Councilmember Hunt, do you have anything else?
Yes. A general question about the services provided. You mentioned that they might address complaints and there's a number of things listed. So I wondered if you could also just expand on what you've seen as the value of having this monitor from the years that we had the monitor.
Yeah, even though this is a housekeeping issue, it's really good to educate, I think, council members on this service. So the contractor looks at a whole lot of data that our public defender and our municipal court provide as far as types of cases, contact with clients, a whole slew of issues that have come out of that Wilbur case. So they look at a lot of data, and then they also pop into court and watch how our public defender are working with their clients. And then they interview the judge, our municipal court staff, and others too. So they do a lot of annual spot checks along with some quarterly checks of data to ensure that, that their clients are getting the best service possible from our defender.
They report to, who do
They report to me.
report to you? Okay.
When is our current monitor retiring?
He's open to staying until we find someone, but he was hoping the end of the year. But
Okay.
there's some flexibility there, so we have some time.
So we would not find ourselves in a position of having a void potentially?
Thankfully, no.
Good. And you've already started the process. I mean, I know this has nothing to do with terminating the ILA, but
Yeah.
interesting to know. You've already started the process of looking for the replacement.
Yes.
Okay. Andy, any other questions? Any thoughts? Councilmember Hunt?
I think that it sounds like in this case the ILA ending is in the best interest of the city, and I'm glad to hear that the services, will continue and there will be continuity of all of the value that was provided, and so there's no issue there. I guess I also, though, just in terms of thinking about how cities might share the resources if you were to use it, if we as a city were to have the same law firm, or if there were other ways to use this kind of agreement that would maximize benefit for our city. I think it was an innovative program, it sounds like, and so it would be interesting to consider in the future if there are other opportunities for that sort of thing. But at this point, it sounds like it makes sense to continue with the severance of the ILA.
So just, I think this made a ton of sense when we entered into this agreement, particularly when it was the 4 cities and it was a way to go and pursue the grant funding. The world has changed significantly. A number of people have already removed themselves from this agreement. So I think the time is right for us to go our way and let Snoqualmie go theirs. I think.
I would agree with those 2 comments.
Awesome. All right, all in favor of sending this to full committee on January 7th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Consent okay?
Yes.
On consent. All right.
Thank you.
I think that brings us to the close of our agenda this evening. The next meeting of Services and Safety is scheduled for January 8th, 2019, even though the agenda says 2018, here at 6:30 in council chambers. And then I just wanted to say, because I had the microphone and I was on TV, I just wanted to wish everybody happy holidays and a very prosperous and wonderful 2019. And with that, we're adjourned.